Hello and welcome. For the birds, humans, and lizards among you who know me, it is no secret that I am both a writer of solidly mediocre skill and a fan of tabletop role-playing games. And the potential intersection between these two is the topic I am rambling about today. Should a writer play in tabletop role-playing campaigns? I think the answer is mostly yes, because there are a few caveats. But before we get to those, I want to first look into the reasons I think it would be helpful for certain writers. One of the best feelings I get from playing in a tabletop campaign is that sense of accomplishment in seeing a character I made and play come into their own. They will have so many problems to handle and so many issues to address that it can sometimes be difficult to see how they might move forward and grow as a person. And with a good GM and a good group, this kind of growth is something that can be achieved as a campaign is played. It doesn't always go in a direction that you might have considered at the start when you first made the character, but provided you are any good at role-playing, it will make sense for them and the circumstances they went through. This, I feel, is something important for writers to come to terms with. Our characters live and die by the illusion of being whole that we build for them, and sometimes maintaining that illusion requires them branching out in a direction we didn't always imagine them going. But I think as a writer it is important to let our characters surprise us and do things we don't expect them to, because that helps make them feel real to us. And if they feel real to us, it becomes easier for us to make them feel real to the audience. Embracing the organized chaos of a tabletop campaign is, for me, one way to achieve this. Speaking of organized chaos, I think more writers could stand to learn the fine art of improvising. And there are few ways to develop that skill better than having to adapt to a situation caused by a roll of the dice. The dice gods don't care about your ideal plot. They don't care about your narrative tension. They don't care about your carefully aligned sequence of events. They do what they will and you are going to have to adapt to what they say. This random, chaotic element is something that can force you to confront situations and problems in a different manner than you or your character typically would. Your character is forced to think outside of their comfort zone, in a manner that may even constitute a disruptive scene. And this disruption, this forced adaptation, can give you insights into your character you would not have had otherwise. And I think this is important to a writer. Sometimes the story goes where you didn't think it would go. I know a lot of the stories I've written over the years have gone in different directions than when I first thought of them. This willingness to adapt to changing circumstances, the ability to embrace a new direction that your story is telling you it wants to go, can be crucial to writers. You might never have thought of it before but realize that yes, this new direction is better and makes more sense given the circumstances. This sense of discovery and the skill needed to adapt to such discovery is important to any writer, whether they are free-flowing and just let the words fly or they like to have detailed and obsessively mapped out plans before ever facing that blank page. At least, that's what I think. Playing for a long time and playing so many characters has also helped me discover how to empathize but not sympathize with my characters. And this is a distinction that I feel is important to writers and one that can so often be forgotten. Through a multitude of characters I've played, I have had to find ways to connect with them, to understand what goes on in their heads, and to grasp at the emotional core that drives them towards their goals. And that is a critical part of writing any character. I think that any writer needs to be able to empathize with a character's motivations, to see where that person is coming from, even if you don't agree with their choices. But just because you feel empathy and understand their pain doesn't mean you think they're right about it. You can acknowledge someone's feelings without agreeing with them. And for me, taking the opportunity to role-play characters with different or even reprehensible viewpoints has helped me find that line between empathy and sympathy. Tabletop role-playing taught me that distinction and the importance of it, and I like to believe it has helped me in writing as well as gaming. I can get into the heads of complete monsters and understand why they do what they do, but without necessarily agreeing with their reasons or methods. Perhaps the most fundamental reason writers should play in tabletop campaigns is the fact that this sort of game is, in a way, still writing. It is far more off-the-cuff and improvisational, often giving you little more than a few short prompts and details to work with. But despite the restrictions and differences, I think it is still fundamentally a writing exercise. You are still getting into a character's head to understand their tics and emotions, you are still engaging in a fictional world and trying to understand how to move around within it, and you might even have an opportunity to explore a grand idea or concept as you go along. Or you just want to see what makes a character click with you while killing monsters and taking their stuff along the way. By playing in these games, you are engaging in creating a narrative. You are part of telling a story. And that is what writing fiction is about in the end, isn't it? Telling a story. It may not be in a form that many associate with writing, but it's still a story and you're still telling it. And along the way, you'll find some of the essence of the writing craft as you play. And if you are a GM, there's an additional benefit for you. You learn fast how to make things immediately engaging and draw people in. No form of writing is quite as adept at showing you how short and fickle the attention of an audience can get as much as running a tabletop game. A good GM learns to give only the details needed, to build an atmosphere that is engaging, to set the mood with just a few choice bits of description, and how to make the stakes feel personal. All of these are skills every writer needs to learn to write good fiction. If just playing is great for developing character and their voice, being a GM is an exercise in mastering the art of engaging, evocative narrative. Now, remember that I said the answer to the question I posed is mostly yes. It's time I clarified that. I am enthusiastic in endorsing tabletop role-playing for writers, but with a few caveats. I think there are things writers might do that are a poor fit into how tabletop games operate. One thing I urge writers getting into role-playing in general is to drop the pretensions of playing the main character. You aren't. You're part of a shared story and you'll get some time in the spotlight, but so will everyone else. Don't expect the game to bend over backwards to accommodate you or how you think things should play out, and you certainly can't demand that the dice play along either. Put your ego aside and play as part of the group. Think of it as being a co-author, if that helps you process it. Another caveat I'd mention is that if you're a planner, if you're the sort who likes to plan ahead and never deviate from it, I urge you to set that notion aside. Between the dice, the imaginations of other players, and the creativity of the GM, you will find your precious pre-planned story arc and plot being thrown around like a tiny tugboat in the middle of three once-in-a-century storms colliding with each other. Your plans won't survive, your outlines will shatter, and your plots won't hold together. Learn to adapt, to keep your goals simple, and to embrace the unexpected. Finally, remember that in tabletop games, a little goes a long way. You don't need the 1000-page backstory for a character, because you'll always have the opportunity to flesh it out as you play. It's great to have a little bit of it to give a character a little color and a sense of place in the wider world, but I'd suggest resisting the urge to go into pages upon pages of detail. Even if you want the GM to use it. In fact, giving too much backstory is a good way to get the average GM to not use any of it, because they already have a lot on their mind and probably more than a few plans, and reading through a long backstory is just going to be more work for someone who is already likely overworked. Focus on the key details and keep it short and simple. Now, with all of that in mind, I still encourage writers new and old to get into tabletop role-playing. There is so much you can learn about the craft through it, I think. And there is so much fun to be had exploring characters and forming stories, whether you have a small group or a large one. It is an education in character work, narrative construction, and adaptability that I don't think you can get anywhere else. And certainly not in as amusing and engaging a form. With that, my rambling for this week is complete. Leave a like and consider subscribing if you enjoyed this. Maybe leave a comment to feed the algorithm. If you're interested in what kind of nonsense I've written, check out the novels linked in the description. See you all next week. And may you always get a natural 20 when you need it most.